Jim Cobb is a prepping expert, a brilliant author of numerous books on the subject, and he's with us to discuss the fundamentals. I'm a prepper. He's a prepper. Wouldn't you like to be a prepper too? And Jim Cobb joins us on this week's episode. Jim's a disaster preparedness counselor, a well-respected author, and his books, if you have any inkling on learning how to prep properly, then Jim's the go-to guy. And he's also a private investigator, security specialist, and it's great to have you on with us, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
You know, the nice thing about you is you are dedicated to helping others become prepared. And I don't think in my 50 plus years that the recognition of that need has been more apparent. Am I overreacting or am I about on target?
Oh, no, this is definitely, for lack of a better term, the golden age of prepping.
The golden age of prepping. And you know, it goes beyond politics. It goes beyond being an outdoors type or being someone that's been militarily trained or have a background in that. It's really about people stepping back and saying, well, what about the food I'm eating? What about the prices of groceries? What about the crazy, crazy stuff that has happened in the last few years that we never really thought? You know, the security, the feeling of security, especially in this country, has started to dissipate in the last couple of years, at least in, you know, me and the people that I know.
Oh, I agree 100%. You know, it's interesting. Every day, it seems like we get more and more people who become interested in, okay, how do I get better prepared for life's little curveballs? You know, what can I do? And frequently, there are people there are individuals who didn't really think about it before. They never gave a second thought to, well, I'm hungry, let's go out to eat. Well, you know, I don't really want to cook tonight. I'm just going to stop and grab dinner on the way home, you know, things like that. And it gets to the point where it's like, okay, what if you can't go out and grab takeout? What if Uber Eats isn't running that day? You know, what do you do? And coupled with that, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of people who are becoming more and more interested in, for lack of a better term, a self-reliant sort of lifestyle. You know, not necessarily a pull up stakes and go live out in the middle of nowhere, but you have more and more urban dwellers who want to raise backyard chickens, for example.
Right.
And, you know, you have more and more people who want to learn how to can their own food at home and how to preserve things for later use. And it's wonderful that all of these people are starving for this knowledge. It's just, in a way, it's a surprise, and in another way, it's a very pleasant surprise.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, Jim, I've always been an avid outdoorsman. It was I grew up on the south side of Chicago, so it was a big thing for us to go away camping and hiking and hunting and fishing on the weekends with my father. It took root deep inside of me because there's an accountability factor there that really turned me on. And I have watched over the last few years people who are very urban and didn't grow up on a farm and didn't grow up with families that took them fishing or hunting. They start to get into this organic food movement because they're looking at what's going on in these factory farms and they're thinking, well, I might as well go shoot a duck or kill a deer to feed my family than to put this poison on our tables. Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about, you know, homesteading, and it's popular where I live. I live in rural Illinois now, and it's grown with not only the organic food movement, but like you were saying, people are keeping chickens, people are keeping goats, and people are, the little gardens that were just tomato plants before are now taking up maybe a fourth or a fifth of the backyard, you know?
Yep. Yeah. And what's interesting is you have more and more people who they're finding ways around the rules where they live. You know, for example, you know, you have these urban dwellers who live in homeowner association governed communities. And some of those HOAs don't allow certain types of gardening and things like that. So I get a lot of inquiries from people like, okay, how can I grow food in my backyard, but so I won't get in trouble with, you know, having a garden or whatever? So we talk about things like container gardening and things like guerrilla gardening, where, you know, you've got your nice little flower bed, but within that flower bed, you're actually growing food alongside those flowers. And the average person has no idea.
Has no idea.
The average person looks at your flower bed. They don't know that big bushy green thing is actually carrots.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I love that kind of stuff. I love trying to help people figure out ways to better meet their needs within the confines of where they live. When we think about homesteading, traditionally, we think about somebody who has, several acres, dozens of acres of land where they can, stretch their arms and they can do all these wonderful things. Not everybody has that luxury. Not everybody has the budget to go out and buy, especially today with the way land prices are.
Right.
Real estate's going through the roof. A lot of people just don't have that option. So it becomes of, how can I do more with less? How can I meet my needs with a backyard, an urban backyard, And fortunately, there are strategies that you can implement, and you're not going to be able to grow everything you're ever going to need, but you can certainly make a dent in the grocery bill.
Supplement a little bit. Yeah, and my wife, when she really started getting into the prepping thing and canning and getting chickens and expanding the garden, it's funny because your name kept coming up. People are saying, this is the go-to guy. He's got a bunch of books that are extremely practical, and your expertise and knowledge that you impart spans the spectrum from, just like you're saying now, daily prepping, saving on the bills, or, oh boy, the shit has hit the fan, we have to survive situations. And I think that's why people bring your name up whenever prepping is concerned.
Well, and obviously, I love to hear that.
Yeah. Right.
So thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've tried to do over the years is I try to be practical, I try to be common sense, and I try to be pragmatic. One of the things that I think is a detriment to we'll just call it the prepping movement, to give it a term. One of the negative aspects of it is people tend to want to get all wrapped up in, say, the politics and, pointing fingers why we're in the situation we're in or whatever. And I try to remove that from the conversation because as a practical matter, it doesn't matter.
It absolutely
We're all
doesn't
facing
matter.
the same grocery prices.
Right.
What are we going to do about it? You know? So I tend to think a lot of that, it becomes a distraction. And
Right.
it tends to pull attention away from what I feel are the more pressing issues. And I think that resonates with a lot of, particularly the new people who are new to the whole prepping thing. They don't want to sit and debate endlessly about this, that, and the other thing. They want to know, what can I do today
Right.
to be in a better position tomorrow?
Because no matter what your political allegiance is or your leanings are, when it comes to protecting your family, your home, your belongings, your life, that goes far beyond who won an election or what taxes are or what, they're going to do with this, that, and the other thing with ordinances. You were talking earlier, survivalists who live off the grid, you kind of mentioned that it's not for everybody. And I think the more we see, the more we're exposed to that. You see these TV shows like Alone, where they put someone out on an island and you have to hunt and fish and build your own place. I think the last couple of years, if we've seen a really big expansion in division, violence, war now, and price hikes, people are thinking, boy, I could never, ever do that. Because even, I try to be practical in my gaining of knowledge, and I read books by guys like you, and I keep up to date on prepping, and I learned that the chickens shouldn't be too close to the house because they're going to bring mice in the house, and so you start to accumulate this knowledge. But there is a discipline to this. So how did you get started? I mean, give us a little background, Jim, on when you started saying this is the route I'm going to go and become an expert in.
Well, I actually got started with prepping when I was about 10 years old, believe it or not. Not formal, I'm not like, investing in stockpiles at 10 years old, but I was about 10. I grew up in the rural Midwest where, tornado warnings and blizzards and things like that, it was very common. It was a big deal, but not a big deal.
Right.
And so the idea of stocking up on food and things like that, that was just kind of how you lived. You didn't necessarily have a food pantry that you could live off of for a year, but you certainly had enough to last a few weeks.
Right.
And I can distinctly remember when I was about 10 years old, we would get, and this is back in the 70s, okay? So when there's a tornado warning, there would be the siren that would come through your TV.
Yes.
It would break into whatever TV show you're watching, and then that scroll would start at the bottom of the screen. And when that would happen, I would take it upon myself to start grabbing what I considered to be survival supplies and take them down into the basement in case a tornado hit. Now, being a young child, the survival supplies were things like blankets, my teddy bear, some canned things, but regardless of how ridiculous that was where the mindset started. And it just kind of snowballed from there. When I was about 12, my dad brought home the first couple of books in a series called The Survivalist by Jerry and Sharon Ahern. And I tore through those within a couple of days and loved it. It was your typical, after a nuclear war, your ex-CIA former surgeon hero has got this massive mountain retreat and things like that. It was a lot of fun. Right. It wasn't all practical, but it was fun. And that really kind of started my mind going about, okay, how do you build a survival retreat, and what do you do? How do you stock it and things like that? And when I went back to the bookstore to get the next couple of books in that series, I came across a book called Life After Doomsday by Dr. Bruce Clayton. Here was an actual for real survival manual that talked about how to practice, how to put all these things together. So I mowed lawns for a couple of weeks to save up the money and went back and bought it. And it was The Survivalist, it was Life After Doomsday. These things really set me on the path. And I just started soaking up every bit of knowledge I could find. Obviously this is years before the internet.
Right.
So I'm scouring through libraries and I'm buying magazines and things like that. As I grew older, once I hit my teens, I became more interested in the kind of things that teens are more interested in and kind of fell away from the prepping for a while. And then in my early 20s, met the woman who would eventually marry, we'd get married. We started a family, and it was right around then that Y2K was starting to crop up in the news. Now, I didn't think Y2K was a big deal. I didn't think it was going to amount to anything, but it was the people who were talking about, and this was the very early years of what we consider prepping today. This is when that term first really started coming into play, because prior to that, it was all survivalism, and it was survivalist. And when you would hear the term survivalist, you'd usually think of some guy dressed head to toe in camouflage, toting some military weapon and whatever. Prepping was like survivalist light. It was much more interested in food storage, water storage, things like that. And as these subjects became more and more talked about in the media, it kind of reignited that passion in my life. I've got a young child, I'm married, I want to be ready just in case something were to happen.
Right.
And again, we're not talking end of the world, we're talking job loss. We're talking severe storms, things like that. So I dove headfirst back into the whole lifestyle, and I haven't looked back since.
So it was just a natural calling. It started out as something, boy, this is interesting, and then, boy, down that rabbit hole you went. And now, you have 10 books out, right? Is it 10 or is it more?
I think it's 10.
10. Yeah, well, they're all very focused, but they all revolve around preparedness and survival. When you talked about it is not a political thing, and it's not. Preparedness is just a natural human urge to survive. Yep. But I have seen, as a parent and as a United States citizen, in the last few years, I have seen a lenience towards violent actions. Maybe I'm not saying they're becoming more acceptable. It just doesn't seem there's much intervention. The riots scared me. When I saw people rioting and looting, I said, well, this is the kind of stuff that happens. But when I saw people intimidating folks at their home, and in Oregon, marching through neighborhoods and getting into people's property and homesteads, I said to myself, there's something missing here. We've kind of lost that security blanket where we say, well, at least the good guys are going to step in and change this, or, the authorities or whatever. Have you noticed a lenience towards violence in America?
To a degree. I mean, I think yes, there's been an increase in incidents and a decrease in what we might think of as proper responses. At the same time, I think with the advent of the way the media is these days, you see it instantly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're seeing these things live where even 10 years ago, you might not see it as much just because the media isn't broadcasting it as much. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, it's kind of like we talk about how it seems like there are so many disasters all over the world all the time. There's always something happening. That's not new.
Right. It's not
It's
new.
just that we're hearing about it more often.
Right. We're bombarded.
You know, when you
with
and I
it.
were kids, if there was an earthquake in India,
Right.
we wouldn't know it for a few days
Right.
at best.
Right.
Now you're seeing it live and in person.
Yeah, right. So the world's always
know?
been crazy. We're just getting it as it happens now. You're right. Yeah. You know, you talk about home defense as well. I want to talk about both literally the home, how to prep the home, and inside the home, how to defend yourself, because I know this is something you touch on very eloquently in one of your books. And to get your house prepped, what are some just quick suggestions? And I know people can get into more details in your books.
Well, I always look at home defense or any security plan in general as having three distinct levels or stages, okay? You have deter, delay, and defend. Deter is basically you're playing on that risk versus reward equation. You want to convince the potential intruder that the risk outweighs the reward. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have this, you know, whiz-bang awesome offense and you're threatening everybody. It's a compromise, okay? It's a balance. You want to increase the risk or the perceived risk while decreasing the perceived reward. So, for example, for the deter, dogs can be a great deterrent if you can have them. You can commit to, you know, having a pet. Motion activated outdoor lights is another one, along with signs that indicate the use of a security system, even if you don't really have that security system. Okay, just putting the signs up is often enough to just convince that person, you know what, it's not worth the potential of that alarm going off. I'm going to go next door. I'm going to go down the street.
Right.
Okay. What's not a deterrent, and I used to see this all the time, are these clever little signs and stickers that say things like, these premises are protected by Smith & Wesson.
Right.
You're not intimidating anybody. All you're doing is advertising that there are firearms in the home that could be stolen. All they got to do is wait for somebody to leave.
Isn't that something? And you know what? I remember getting in an argument, and I'm going to branch off here on a tangent. I'm going to get back to your three levels in just a moment. The whole thing about firearms, because I'm a Second Amendment proponent. I've been asked to speak many times. I run a camp each year where we teach, amongst many programs for the outdoors, gun safety. And I live next to Indiana. And so oftentimes I'll go shopping in Indiana. A lot of people there are open carry people. And I always tell when I get the chance to that is an extremely poor tactical decision. You're telling anybody that's a professional criminal, you're the first person that needs to go out. There's no element of surprise. It also puts the public on edge. You know, the little old lady getting a bagel doesn't want to see a big gun on your hip, and if you're not a police officer. So I think those are the things. That's the same thing as when people put, you know, we have guns on the property, or, you know, this home protected by Smith & Wesson. Like you said, you're just telling people who pass by, scouting your house, well, there's guns in there. We can get money for those. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was level one. I didn't mean to...
no, you're fine.
So
Spin off just a little bit further
Yeah.
with the open versus concealed carry. One of the biggest problems that I see either way is the lack of training.
Lack of training.
You know, people
Yes.
think all they got to do is go out and buy the pistol, put it on their hip, and they're good to go.
Right.
And if you're not trained in how to keep that weapon secure, and on top of that, you're using faulty gear,
Right.
you're putting yourself at greater danger of somebody just taking it away from you.
Yeah, that's the next point I had on my notes here is I have a hard time with people who, because I encourage everyone who's of sane mind and who wants to protect themselves to look into firearm ownership. But here in Illinois, you have to get a concealed carry permit. But even that, you purchase a gun, you do your research, you talk to buddies, you talk to the gun shop guy. Even getting a gun, taking that training program, if it's, 18, 20 hours, whatever it is, if you're not practicing with that thing all the time, the remote chance that you're going to have to use it, you're probably not going to be familiar with it if you're not training with it. People practice their golf swings and people play, you know what I'm saying? Go to the gun range and learn and ask questions. Yeah, that's a great point, because I see that too. Because the one thing that has been instilled in me, and I own a few guns, and I like to shoot guns often, I'm always afraid of a gun. And 2009, this day, it was St. Patrick's Day, 2009, I lived in Kankakee, Illinois. I'm laying in my robe on my couch watching television. My daughter was very young at the time. She was in her bedroom, and my wife was brushing her teeth, getting ready for bed, and this guy comes right through the front door. And I had taken enough tactical training with law officials that said you assess the situation. And I immediately knew he was drunk and that he fell down, first of all. So he didn't seem that much of a threat, but still, I had a gun and 911 in a moment, and I knew that I couldn't shoot him unless he threatened my life. And that is, that's that. And so many people think, well, if someone breaks in my house, they're gonna go out feet first. Well, you're gonna end up going to jail if you don't know the laws in your state.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And even when we talk about, spinning this back to the prepping area, we talk about, these grid down scenarios, these long-term disasters. If there was, an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, or something like that, people talk about how it's just going to be this Mad Max world. The reality is no disaster lasts forever. And at some point, order is going to be restored, probably sooner than you think it will. And at some point after that, there may be consequences for the actions you took while the grid was down.
Right.
And I'm not saying that, that means you can't protect your family or whatever. All I'm saying is it's not necessarily going to be the free-for-all that you think it's going to be, at least not forever.
Right.
Now, back to the home security before we get further down a rabbit hole. The second layer is delay. There's deter, then there's delay.
Right.
Delay focuses on ways to increase the amount of time it takes for the intruder to reach their objective, while also decreasing the amount of time it takes you to learn that they're there. Okay?
All right.
So, for example, using sturdy locks on all your doors, so they're not easy for somebody to just walk right in. The existence of an actual alarm system that, they can see the panel on the wall and they know that they're going to have to do something about that. These are things that are going to slow them down. Planting thorny shrubs in front of your windows so they can't easily just zip right in, and they're going to have to deal with that. And then the third is defend. This is where, okay, they got in, you found that they're there, what do you do about it? Whether it's, utilizing a firearm or another weapon. One of the things that I always caution people at this point is there's a lot of literature out there about putting up booby traps in your house and on your property. And this is an incredibly bad idea all around. Not only are most of them illegal, and we just talked about the consequences end of this, on top of that, they're far more dangerous to you and your family than they are to any intruder.
Right.
Because you've got a grandchild who comes to visit and you didn't get a chance to tell them where the tripwires are in the yard, things like that. And on top of that, you're also endangering first responders. If there's a fire in your house or somebody has a heart attack, you call 911, they come barreling in and end up getting a leg shot off because you had the back door wired to a shotgun.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, if you do the research, there are all kinds of different there's all kinds of case law out there about situations that happen where even if, okay, let's just devil's advocate, you were 100% in the right in that you set up this booby trap because somebody kept breaking into your house, and somebody does break in with demonstrable intent to do harm, and you shoot their leg off, you're still going to get sued.
Right.
And you're still going to pay out the nose for legal fees, even if you win the case.
Yeah. Yeah, or someone innocent coming to your house for whatever reason, their car broke down, they want to use your phone, and you end up killing them.
Exactly.
Yeah, the booby trap thing is always, that to me, with people like you and all the prepper guys and gals that I know, and all the people that are into practical survival techniques, the booby trap to me always seems like something that goes over the edge into something that's fantasy world. There's many more practical things you can do to prepare yourself.
Absolutely. And
I forget so much stuff, I would blow my own leg off coming home from work.
Exactly. Exactly. You get home, your arms are full of groceries, you nudge the door in, and next thing you know, you wake up in a hospital room.
Right.
Here are a couple of things that people can do that are very, very cheap and easy and actually have a positive impact. Number one, go through and replace all of the hinge screws on your exterior doors. Your exterior doors typically have 3 hinges, and the hinge is attached to the wall, or the door frame rather, and the door itself. The screws that go into the door frame, back them out one by one. You'll see that they're not even an inch long in some cases, okay? Take one of those screws, go to the hardware store, and buy a handful of stainless steel screws the same thickness or same diameter, but about 3 inches long. Then take them home and one by one back out the old screw, put in the new screw. What you're doing is you're attaching that hinge to the frame itself, to the structure of the wall, not just the thin wood that's holding the door up. And it makes it much more difficult to kick the door in. The other tip, and this is so easy, use the locks you have. So many people don't lock their door. They don't lock the windows. And then they're shocked that somebody came in. Use the locks. That's why they're there. Install a deadbolt on your exterior doors and use it.
Right.
That in and of itself is a major deterrent. Somebody walks up, they jiggle the door. Oh, it's locked. They move on to the next place.
Right. You know, when you talked about the third level defense, someone's in your house and having enough of an outlay of the house and understanding they're making a lot of noise. I know someone's coming in. I'm down the hall. I know my kids are next to me, or, in the next room. You have to know the layout, but also when it's dark, give some firearm tips. For my fear is people get scared. They're not thinking of gun safety, and they're going to put one through the wall and maybe hit a child or whatever, their spouse.
Right.
It can't be a labyrinth in the dark. No,
you have to know the house. What I always recommend are people to use night lights throughout the house. The ones with the eye, where when the room gets dark, the lights come on. When you turn on the light in the room, the night lights go off. Use these little lights throughout the house so that way you're not operating in pitch darkness, number one, okay? Number two, you need to get training. You need to seek out classes that go beyond just hitting paper targets at the range, okay? You need to understand that shooting a paper target at a range is far different than your heart is in your throat, your hands are shaking something fierce, you can't see anything.
Right.
One real simple thing that you can do just to kind of emulate what it's going to feel like is go to the range and do 35 jumping jacks as fast as you can, and then pick up your firearm and try to hit the target. With your pulse racing,
yes,
okay, your hands are going to be shaking. It's a lot different than just going to the range with your buddies for an afternoon and burning through a couple of boxes of ammunition.
Absolutely.
Everyone's
an armchair general when it comes to survival and defense. Because the day after this gentleman came into my house, and again, he was drunk. It was St. Patrick's Day. He just didn't know where he was at. On the phone, I had 911 yelling at me, "Don't shoot him! Don't shoot him! Don't shoot him!" Does he have a firearm? And he actually reached in his jacket and pulled a beer out. At that point, I didn't know if it was a gun. And you talked about my heart being in my throat. I had never been so frightened in my life because the last thing I wanted to do was shoot somebody,
Right.
And it's funny because you do 30 jumping jacks and get yourself worn out and hyped up, get that blood pressure going, and then see how accurate you are. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
You've taught your family this stuff too. How do you start teaching a child the practical side of being prepared. And whether that's being, aware of your surroundings, which I always hound my daughter with, be aware of everything that's going on around you. 2, saving for the rainy day.
Well, with things like situational awareness, for example, make a game out of it. Kids like to have fun. One of the easiest way to teach children skills is to make it fun for them. And that's where I think sometimes we fall flat because we want them to you just need to know this. Well, yeah, but they're not going to retain it unless they understand the concept, and they're going to get that through repetition if you make it into a game. So, for example, with situational awareness, when my kids were little and we would go somewhere, I would make a game out of, okay, what color was the shirt on the guy who just passed us? Or was he wearing glasses? Or how many kids did that mother have with her? Things like that, where after a while it gets to be just kind of a habit that you make little notes about what's going on. Another thing that I would talk to my kids about is make a story out of what's going on around you, just in your head, and you're narrating a story. And you pick up on little details, and then we went to the beach, and as we walked down the beach, we saw a mom. She had her 2 kids, and her 2 kids were playing in the sand while the mom was reading a book and things like that, and you start to pick it up. You start to remember it.
Learn how to recall things. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's excellent.
With the financial part of it.
Yes.
This is an area where my wife really was the one. I will readily admit that I did not grow up with financial sense at all.
Right.
At all.
Right.
My parents were very, very much the paycheck came in, we're spending it immediately.
Right.
And try to keep up with the Joneses. And I mean, it was the 80s, and everybody was trying to buy. And my wife was very much not like that. And this led to some strife when we, got together. And eventually I understood where she was coming from and realized that she's right. And we've tried to instill some of these financial skills to our kids with, saving for a rainy day and the danger of credit cards.
Amen.
Now, one of the things that I talk about when I give classes on like financial preparedness, things like that, credit cards are not inherently evil. It's us that use them in the wrong way.
It's the impulse.
Okay?
Yes.
Now, just as an example, we have a credit card that gives us a cashback bonus based on how much we use it. Okay. We use that card for everything. Every purchase we make from day to day goes through that credit card. I'm talking groceries, I'm talking Walmart, I'm talking gas, I'm talking car insurance payments, the premium for our health coverage. That all goes through this one credit card. We pay it off every month. We're not spending more. We're just, all these different bills that we would normally pay separately, we're just paying them all with this credit card and then making one payment to the credit card each month.
Yeah.
In doing this, we have earned thousands.
Right. You're getting paid.
In cash back.
You're working the system against itself. That's fantastic. And
now,
more and more people are doing that, though. But you have to have a discipline. There's a discipline.
I was just going to say, this isn't for everybody.
No, don't everybody do this. Really, you have to be objective about yourself before you do that.
You have to be very disciplined. You have to really know from day to day how much you're spending, how much you're going to be able to pay, because the last thing you want to do is pay interest. Every dollar that you pay in interest and fees is a dollar less that you have available to spend on something fun or to spend on prepping or food or whatever the case is. And the objective is always to make them pay you, not you pay them.
Right. Beautiful. We touched on awareness and teaching your kids to be aware of their surroundings. Let's talk about when a situation escalates. You're on the street. Let's talk about survival on the streets, being prepared on the street. You're at a restaurant with your family. Someone goes crazy or starts doing something. How do you approach that situation?
Number one, always have an exit route. Okay. Now, when I say that, Some people have a tendency to think I'm insisting everybody turn themselves into Jason Bourne or some secret agent, and they walk into a room and immediately assess all these different things. All I'm suggesting is always know how you can get out of where you are if the front door isn't available. Know where the fire exits are. Know where the employee-only doors are. Things like that. One of the things that we overlook, because they're so common, they just become part of the landscape, are these doors that say employees only. Some of them are just stock rooms, but a lot of them lead you to a back entrance, the employees only area where the employees come and go, or the dock that you can get out from,
right?
Where they pull up the trucks, things like that. Always look for ways that you're going to be able to get you and your family out of the situation and to safety. If I'm in a restaurant or I'm in a store and some guy just starts going crazy, my first job is to make sure my family is safe. I want to get them out of there. I want to get them away from the danger, get a hold of 911, let them know what's going on, and let them take care of it.
Right.
If I'm unable to get my family out of the situation, or I'm in immediate danger, I'm going to take whatever action I feel is necessary to protect myself and my family, and then get the hell out of there. One of the things that we talk about are less than lethal options, such as pepper spray. Don't ever use wasp spray. I don't care what you've read online. It doesn't work. Use real pepper spray.
Right.
The idea behind pepper spray is to disable the attacker, okay? It's not going to kill them. It's not going to it affects their vision, and it affects their breathing. And it does so in a very immediate way. There are very, very few people who can take a full shot of full strength, good quality pepper spray and just laugh it off.
Right.
Okay? It's not a matter of how tough they are. It's a matter of how their body actually reacts to it. The mucous membranes swell up, eyes start to tear, it becomes hard to breathe, it becomes hard to see, and you're able to get away.
Buys you time,
okay?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about is buying time. We're talking about delaying their attack enough that you can get you and your family out of there.
Right.
And then let the authorities handle it. That's what they get paid to do.
And you have to learn how to use pepper spray too, so you don't end up spraying it in your own face. Everything is training. Everything is training.
Yeah. At the end of the day, what matters is if you wake up the next morning on the green side of the grass.
Right.
Okay? And if you do, yay, you won.
Right, that's it. Your books are very practical to use, and they're very to the point. There's not a lot of wandering around and stuff. And I own land in remote Michigan, and there's a lot of people there off the grid. And you talk about in your financial prepping book, the barter system and learning that and knowing that if something stops us in our tracks as a society and we have to learn how to coexist with people who are no longer going to work or the stores are closed, there's a barter system that you need to learn about. Let's elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, there's pros and cons to relying on barter, okay? Number one, it can be a wonderful, wonderful tool.
Right.
If you go into it with the right mindset. The problem is there are a lot of preppers or aspiring preppers who think, okay, I need to stock up on a bunch of stuff that I can use for barter later. So I'm going to go buy a couple of cases of disposable lighters, some cheap folding knives, and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm going to put it all in a box so that way down the road I have it that I can trade people for eggs and whatever else I need. That's the wrong approach for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're counting on somebody else having thought to prep something you didn't. Okay?
Right.
And on top of that, in order for a successful trade to happen, you need to have something they want. They need to have something you want. Both of those things need to be of comparable value to one another, and you need to be aware that each other exists.
Right.
And that's that last part is where it kind of falls apart for some people because at the same time, there's this whole, you can't tell anybody you're a prepper and you got to avoid people and blah, 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 which is ridiculous. And we'll get to that in a minute.
Right.
But as a practical matter, the way barter should work is you make those connections now.
Right.
With your neighbors and with people in your community. You find out, okay, well, Susie, a couple houses down, she has chickens in her backyard. And I really like to bake. So I'm going to work out a trade with her maybe. I'm going to talk to her and see if she'll take a couple of loaves of bread for a dozen eggs or a couple dozen eggs and do this on a regular basis. And then when spring comes and we put in our gardens, I might talk to Joe across the street and Barbara kitty corner and see what they're going to plant so that we're not all planting everything exactly the same. And maybe I'll grow potatoes while he grows asparagus and she grows this, and we're going to do kind of a round robin trade at the end of this growing season.
Right.
You need to have these conversations now, and it doesn't at all need to be about prepping when you're talking to them.
Right. It's just like reliance, like a co-op. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Many communities have a community garden area. Smaller towns, they have land specifically set aside for people who don't have a backyard where they can grow gardens.
Right.
And you can go there and you can, grow your stuff there. You rent a little plot or whatever it is. Talk to the other people there and start to network with them. Talk about what they're growing. And on top of, being able to set up some of these trading relationships, you'll also get a feel for, okay, this guy's been growing gardens for 30 years. He knows what's going to grow in this area and what isn't. So I'm going to talk to him and find out what grows really well here and what I should avoid planting because it's just going to be a waste. Things like that. Trading isn't always about stuff.
Right.
Trading can be about skills and about knowledge, too.
In Michigan, because ultimately I'm a city boy. The last, 10, 15 years I've been on a farm, but it's instilled in me. I didn't grow up with that connection to the earth that someone who lives on a farm their whole life does. And in Michigan, I have a guy who has blue tick hounds, and our barter system is he keeps deadfalls, he takes them, and I say, if because snow comes through there or the wintertime when I can't get in there, the trees are going to fall. I said, you take the trees that fall so I can get in my driveway and you can run your hounds down my country lane. There's our trade-off. So that's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
or you have a neighbor who, you happen to know that they're either a mechanic full-time or they just like to tinker with cars, and you're a roofer. Okay. So you offer, hey, I see your garage really, the roof is looking kind of bad. I'd be happy to patch that up and help you out if you could help me get my truck running again because, there's something wrong with it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
We do these things all the time. We just don't think of them as barter. We just think of it as being a good neighbor.
Right. And you'll have those people on your mind when you do need them in a dire situation. I gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
When I'm in Michigan and I'm camping for a week, I'm always exposed to new challenges that I'd never thought of, whether it's an insect bite or whatever, or something's not working and I have to go find someone in the middle of nowhere to fix it. What other things besides firearm safety and maybe walking, an emergency plan with your family through the house, we can practice them, we can think about them, but until we put them into being done, we're not expert at them, And so what are some of the ways you would train someone for a disaster situation?
Well, one of the easiest things to do is tell the family, okay, from Friday evening until Sunday afternoon, we're going to pretend we have no power in the house. Nothing, you're not able to use anything electronic unless it's something that you have charged up now, but you can't recharge it when the battery dies. Okay? And we have no internet. Nothing, you can't communicate with the outside world. There's no internet, there's no social media, blah, 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 blah. And just try it for a couple of days and see what challenges you run into. Now, some people will go so far with these drills as to they'll shut off the main breaker to the house and literally shut off the power. that's okay, but you run the risk of losing the food in the fridge and damaging food in the freezer and things like that just for the sake of realism, you know? And when you're just starting out in particular, the last thing you want to do is create more expense for the family rather than trying to save money, you know?
Right.
So try faking it just for a day, just even a day, just one day, no power.
Right.
And see what the challenges are. See what you didn't think of.
Right.
You know, and it's just like when you go camping for the first time. A lot of people, they bring so much stuff and they realize they really didn't need half of it, and they forgot a dozen things that they should have brought.
Forgot the stuff you should have brought, and all the food that you have in the cooler is not going to make it back home. I gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah. Man, I could spend all day with you. This is amazing stuff.
You know, another one that I like to do is the evacuation drill.
Right.
Where you say, okay, I'm going to set an alarm, or I'm going to, you know, do something, just going to yell, whatever it is. And we want to see how quickly we can get everybody, the pets, everything out to the vehicle and away from the house. You know, how quickly can we do that? And the first couple of times, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. People, you end up, you forgot a kid, or
right.
You know, things like that.
We lost
but after
the keys,
a while,
right?
you start to get into a rhythm with it, and you start to realize, you know, where you can shave time, and every time you do it, you get a little bit better and a little bit better. After a while, it becomes second nature.
Yeah. You know, when we did that at my house, we didn't do it too drastic, and we didn't turn the power off or anything, but we did talk about evacuation, and wherever you're at in the house, what's the closest door to get out of the house? Until we did that, it didn't dawn on me how many doors I have in my house, now that became a concern, you know? It's like, well, we got to make sure we lock every one of these things, you know, at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I never use that door that's in the, you know, that particular room that I never go in. That's a door to the outside. I might want to, you know, remember that one. Yeah. So much to go through with you, man. It is a real pleasure. And an hour went by quickly with you, but I want to tell people this is just the tip of the iceberg. You, like a young Jim Cobb discovering that survival book and just delving right into it. It's interesting, it's fun, and it's written in a very, very conversational style. Let's talk about where they can get you. I mean, just the books I'm looking at, and all you have to do is go to Amazon and put Jim Cobb prepping. I mean, that's like synonymous. But you've got the financial guide. You've got what's the countdown one, right? Countdown
to preparedness.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. It's set up like it's a class.
Yes.
Okay, where there's 52 different lessons in there. Each one of them, the idea originally was you could spend a year and do a lesson a week, and at the end of the year, you're going to be prepared. And a lot of people go through it a whole lot faster than a year. They don't take a week to go through one lesson. But each lesson has, a reading section, and then certain items to stock up on for food and water, money to set aside for future emergencies, things like that, different homework assignments. It's a lot of fun. A lot of people really like that approach. The book that is the most popular among my readers is Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide.
Right.
That one, I couldn't even begin to tell you how many thousands and thousands of copies that book has sold over the years.
That's the book
really
that talks about, like we were touching on, living within your neighbors and living with people that you know. Yeah, that's important. Yeah, because like you said, even when the disaster becomes, is alleviated, or when, we come to the clearing, it's good to know that you have people on your side while it's happening. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
You can find my books at Amazon or pretty much anywhere books are sold. If they don't have them on the shelf, they can certainly order them in. I'm the editor-in-chief for Prepper Survival Guide and Backwoods Survival Guide magazines. You can find those anywhere magazines are sold: Walmart, Costco, Walgreens, Tractor Supply, Barnes & Noble. They've all got them. Backwoods comes out 6 times a year. Prepper comes out 4 times a year. I usually have at least a couple articles of my own in each issue, in addition to articles from a very, very diverse group of writers who are all loaded with practical experience. I contribute regularly to Knives Illustrated, American Outdoor Guide, Field and Stream. I've been in a handful of others over the years. I've got a new book coming out later this summer called The Urban Prepper's Guide. I think that's out in August.
I think that's the timing is perfectly done on that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And that one's a lot of fun. It's very visual. There's a lot of really great illustrations and photos that drive home the lessons that I'm trying to teach.
Yeah. Yeah. What a life you lead, Jim. It's a pleasure talking to you, man.
I'm living the dream, man.
You're doing it. And, you know, like as a young boy, you got that calling and that was it. And now you are the go-to guy. And can people catch you on podcasts or is there a newsletter?
The best way to find me online right now is on Facebook. I have a couple of websites that we're in the middle of dismantling and rebuilding.
Yeah.
But Facebook is the best way to find me. Just search Jim Cobb and look for the icon of the Urban Prepper's Guide.
Excellent.
That's the photo I'm using right now. Easy to find me. And, I've got a couple of groups on Facebook that I admin. Real World Prepping is my favorite group. That I created that several months ago, and people are really loving it. So if you can't find me, do a search for Real World Prepping. Find that group, click join, and, join in the conversations.
Yes, glean the information that could save your life and definitely make you feel more confident about going through this thing we call life with Jim Cobb. Jim, thank you so much, man. What an honor.
Thank you, sir. Anytime.